come on in. We're going to talk about pocket knives. We'll begin taking this apart and restoring it. Again, the handles are off. My center pin is already out. So these handles just unsnap. Okay, so there's my mark side. You see that spring is still captured. There's the Swinden pins, Swinden rivets on each side of it. If I could hold it where you could see it, that would help. Now this is the second spring. So you know how I always mark my springs, so I'll know which way they go and which order. So since that is the pile side or the back side spring, it gets 2 marks. That's my second spring. Even though this one's captured, it won't be once we take it apart. So it gets, well, it gets 1 mark. There we go. Okay, that back handle unsnaps and comes loose. That's our pile side. And there's everything in between. So taking this apart is very easy. We'll just take our cutters, clip the head off that Swinden pin very gently. There we go. And there is the Swinden rivet, or at least half of the Swinden rivet. I know you can't really see it from that picture. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this key out as well, or the Swinden pin out as well. On several knives I have redone where I had to replace one blade, I would just pin through at one side, and that tends to work very well. But then the side that has the Swinden rivet does not. It doesn't have good snap. I don't know exactly why that is. So if I go ahead and drill out both sides and put pins through on both ends of the knife, it tends to work a lot better. You tend to have good snap on all your blades. There we go. And the only explanation I have for that is that I just can't drill everything perfectly. That's it. There are our 2 Swinden rivets. All right, we're going to go ahead and drill the handles for the pins. I've determined that the holes for the blades and the other parts here are 3/32 of an inch. So I've got my pin stock ready. Now there are better ways to do this. There are people who have made some jigs that hold this flat for a drill press. I have not yet made one of those. So what I've done, I've got this piece of wood that's dished out to hold the rounded side of the knife steel. And again, if I had it on a drill press, I could get this perfectly. I'm not going to get it perfect, but I'm going to get it as good as I can. This has worked for me many times, but precision is better, I know. All right, so we see how we have the large round hole here and then the small keyway. We want to go in the small keyway as high as we can and just drill straight down. Okay, so we drill through. Now this side, again in the small end, as tightly up in there as we can get, straight through. Okay, so we have that one side. Now we'll go to our pile side. Repeat the process. After drilling these holes, we want to countersink them. I use a bead reamer for this. Fairly inexpensive. It's made from metal or ceramic beads. It's diamond coated. You can just put that on there, twist it by hand while pushing inward. And I kind of mark where I'm at mentally. And then after about 30, 35 turns, I can see that my tool is going much further into the bolster than it previously was. I'm going a little bit crooked now. I just realized that. So let me back out and fight to straighten it a little bit. There we go. That's much better. All right. Then we'll do the other side. Look at it. Now I'm straight. All right, I got this at a pet supply store. It was made for animal chews. You can dig through those and find some pieces that have good figuration, good coloration, something you'd be proud to put on a knife. Now it's very thick for a pocket knife. This a couple of slabs like this would probably be perfect for a big hunting knife, but we're going to have to do a lot of cutting and sanding to make this fit a pocket knife. But it's still a good source you can pick through and find. We can order things like this online, but you don't get to see what you're ordering. When you actually get it in a local store, then yeah, you can pick that out. Hopefully you live in a place where there are natural sheds. Around here, the only deer we have are whitetail, and whitetail is so curved, it's very difficult to get a piece to work off of. I believe it's going to be somewhat of a tight fit. I believe we'll be able to get both pieces out of this. All right, so we've cut out these slabs of antler to the approximate length that I need, but we're going to have to thin them out now. So as you look, you see you've already got a flat part here where it was cut originally, and your natural inclination is to line up everything with that. But you see the difference in thickness from one side of this slab to the other. There's no way you can make that fit properly on the knife. So what we're going to have to do is try to thin it out in respect to the outside or the top side of this. So I'm going to take a pencil and mark from one end to the other so we don't have to sand away so much of the exterior, and mark a line right here and try to flatten it along that line. I'll use the bandsaw to cut it, and then we'll sand it flatter on a belt sander. But we're going to try to cut away all of that material and see if we can make this thin enough that it will fit onto a pocket knife. All right, so we've got these two pieces cut and thinned out. Cut them on the bandsaw, sanded them on the belt sander, and I thought they were thin enough, but they're not. One rule of thumb is every time you think you have it sanded down thin enough, you walk back, hold it up to the knife, and you realize it's still too thick. Now what we're going to do is choose between these two pieces to go on the knife, and we'll cut the length exact to fit between the bolsters, and then start contouring it after. We'll get it up there marked off. I guess the fun part of this is antler is a natural material, and every piece is different. No two are exactly alike. So you want to find where the pattern fits the contour of the knife. I have this deep bit of worm groove here that we want to keep. That looks very pretty to me. And so I'm going to see where it fits the contours of the shape of this knife handle the best. Once we get it picked out, we will figure out which way we're going to orient it and mark this for the mark side. Now for the pile side of this knife, I'll take the other piece of antler and we'll hold it up and see what we've got. And you see I have a deep curve on this end, so we want to make sure that's the end we cut away. You don't want to keep that. So I'll line up the other end. As you see, it doesn't line up straight with the bolster. We'll have to sand that flat to get it straight. But once we do, we'll hold it up. We'll mark this right here where we cut it off. We'll get rid of that deep curve. Now, you have to make sure that this fits tightly between the two bolsters. Not too tightly. If it's too tightly, it tends to make them flex and bend. The knife will no longer sit straight. You'll have problems with your blades. So it's fairly critical that we get a tight fit there. But I think once we do, that's going to make a nice pile side handle for the back of the knife. Now that I have these handles cut to length, you can see I've got them on here just as a test fit. We'll begin marking them to contour the edges. Now first I just typically mark this with a pencil, and then I will cut just outside those lines. I like to leave a little extra. Sometimes you need to adjust the handle material right or left a little bit, slide it around on that knife to get a perfect fit, and then I do the finish sanding after I have things together. So we'll mark that out. Now on this one, we've got a bit of a problem on one side here. Let me go ahead and mark the lines, then I'll show you the problem. That's right here on this end, you see some of the pith is showing. Now what that is the very porous inside of the antler, and if that shows on the exterior of this knife, on the edges, then it will fill up with sanding material, with polishing compound, and it looks terrible. So we'll have to thin this piece down and get rid of most of that pith to make sure it doesn't show once this is complete. So I have the antler pieces cut out, and they're ready to fasten onto the handles. As you see, I've contoured them out. I wound up doing that with the sander rather than the bandsaw. It was almost as quick, and it's a little bit safer. Now, I thinned the material down some more, and once I did, we wound up with a small problem here. On each end, it didn't fit just right. It was too tight. As I sanded some off, I wound up getting an angle on one end, and it just widened up a gap. So if there's one thing I learned from Bob Ross, it's that you take an accident and turn it into a happy little accident. I shortened those pieces a bit more, and I'm going to take some G10. That's a product similar to micarta, very thin but very durable. Take some of this red G10. I'm going to cut some thin strips off of it. We'll insert those thin strips on each end of this to make some spacers. This is something I've seen on other knives. Usually it's intentional. This is going to be done just because I made a mistake. But we'll put these spacers on each end. We'll glue them in place. Once everything is sanded down, you'll see a little strip of red on each end of the antler. It makes for a good look, and I look forward to seeing how this one's going to turn out. Now we're going to go ahead and glue this on. Gluing is somewhat of a boring enterprise, so I'm going to put this at double speed. Also, I'm doing the voiceover because it was a hot July day with the fans running. You couldn't hear anything, and I've done a voiceover for much of this video, but for this part in particular. So what we're doing, just spreading the glue out, very thin layer, and make sure you put it not only on the flat of it, but also on the ends. I'll treat the handle material and also the brass itself that it's going to stick to. Thin layer, spread it out with that craft stick, and then I will use the excess to coat the spacers so that they also have glue on them. Now, what I did not show you in this video is the prep work that goes along with gluing. Especially if you're not going to pin a knife, you want to make sure you clean that very well. Residue from the sanding belts will keep or prevent glues from adhering well. Oils from your skin from touching it, you want to wear gloves. Now in this case also, the last time I used this glue, I picked up some dirt with it. I tried to clean my hands off, it looked good, but within an hour or so all of that turned very black, and I had to wear that look around for a few days. It just wasn't very attractive. The glue is, as far as I know, non-toxic. It's not like the epoxies, but still I wanted to prevent it, so I decided I would work with gloves on. That serves several functions. Now you can see right here, before I put up my glue bottle, I squeeze out that air bubble. That will cause the glue to harden up, so always squeeze that out, and that will last you much longer. Again, spreading out the glue. I do, as I said before, pin my knives as well as glue them. It is sort of a belt and suspenders type idea. If the glue fails, the pins will hold. Vice versa, if the pins fail, the glue will hold. But as well, it seals up the material. It creates a kind of a watertight, airtight bond between that brass and the handle material. After taking apart several old knives, you find all kinds of oil and dirt and gunk inside there, and this prevents that, especially if you have translucent materials such as celluloid or mother of pearl. You can see the gunk build up back behind it, but this will prevent that, and again, it holds the knife very well because you have two different methods of holding it together. All right, well, it's a few days, actually a few weeks later for me, just a few minutes for you, but let's have a look and see what our handles look like. good. I like the way these look. I do like the way these look. All right. So I'm getting my mask on. We're going to do some sanding, and then we'll start seeing really how it's going to turn out. Now, it's my habit to just barely peen these bolster pins as I put them in place. These are not fully peened. I will probably cut them off a little shorter later. This is just to keep the pins from falling out as I'm assembling the knife. And then later, after I do my test fits, we'll go back and peen them into place for real. I was having trouble peening the pin because of the antler material, the configuration of it. So now we're going to try to spin the head of the pin. I've made a device here out of a set screw. As you can see, I've sharpened the tip down, and it has a tiny dimple in the very center of it. I've got another one on this metal piece here that is facing upward. So I'm going to chuck this in the drill press, and we'll use this to apply pressure as it's spinning onto the pin, which carves a little dome shape into the head of the pin. This also flares it outward. This is a technique that many cutlery companies used, and you can sometimes see the design cut around the head of the pin as well. Now, I have a set of these that a man gave me, a good friend in the knife community, but they didn't work very well. It was a store-bought brand. But this is one I made, and it works adequate. It's probably a little small for this setup, but it does work on this pin. And you can see I get my elbow in the way, so you have trouble seeing. I don't have a good place to set up the camera on this end of the shop. That's something I need to remedy. We'll hit that a couple of times, then I'll flip the knife over, and we'll do the other side of the pin. So now that we have the knife assembled, we have that center pin spun, which is going to put the head on there. We're going to go ahead and peen these pivot pins on each side. Just make sure we get it set carefully on the anvil. Peening techniques, I have other videos for that. We can reference those. Be glad if you look at those, but this is just my technique. There may be other ways of doing it, but it doesn't take a lot with these silver nickel pins. We'll try it a couple times, make sure the snap is there, make sure we have no more side-to-side play in the main blade. Now we'll do the same thing to the other side with the sheep's foot blade. Peen it just a little bit. And now we'll check the side-to-side play. Both of those pretty good, decent snap. So we'll start a spade blade on the other end of the knife. And this one came together pretty well. It doesn't need a lot of fine tuning, maybe just a few taps here and there. But I do have a problem with that sheep's foot blade. It is wanting to set a little too close to the other small blade when I close the knife. Try to crank it just a little bit and see if we can't make this blade's closing better. Anytime you have 3 or 4 blades closing into one blade well, it's very easy for those to get tangled up. They don't have to be off, but just at a slight angle to cause them to close the wrong way. I mean, just a few thousandths of an inch can cause that. So cranking is bending the blade. We want to bend it right at the tang. It's one of those things you want to be careful with. It's very easy to break a blade, but that one can turn out pretty well. I will sand these bolsters. Normally I grind the head off that pin first using the platen part of the sanding belt. Then I move up to the slack and really smooth it out. That's where we make those pins disappear. Whether we're using the platen or the slack, you just have to be careful, hold the knife straight. If you get into the edge of the belt at a slight angle, it will completely ruin your knife, and you want to avoid that. So take your time, do it right. It only takes a few minutes, and this is done, and the knife is almost ready to polish. And then after I get the bolster sanded, I'm going to sand the contours of the knife a little more. I do this along the back of the knife to get the liners, the springs, the handles, and everything lined up perfectly. Before, when I did the sanding on the handles, before I installed them, I get the handle material down pretty close to the liners, but now we want everything flat and as perfect as we can get it. So we replaced the main blade. It's brand new, but the other two blades were original to the knife, and they're fairly rusty. So I'm going to take a moment and clean those up on the belt sander. Thankfully, there was no pitting on the metal, so it cleaned up just fine. They look great.